Hi everyone, I'm Dale Smith, aka Journo Dale, and we're here to talk about Canadian politics. This week, I thought I would talk about riding boundary redistribution. The report from the Chief Electoral Officer came down this week, and he's recommending 4 new seats for the upcoming federal election cycle. Probably not until around 2024 by the time everything gets said and done. But this is the kind of process by which this happens. Now, unlike other countries like the US and the UK, who have fairly fixed numbers in terms of representatives in their lower house, in Canada, we allow it to grow and have more, we allow it to grow rather than just redistribute ridings to keep the numbers constant. And that's kind of a good thing because it allows for some more dynamism, and we really are on the lower end of countries who have numbers of representatives. We could or probably should have a lot more than the 338 than we already do, just in terms of the number of bodies that we need in order to make everything happen, especially things like committees. And also, it'd be good to have stronger backbenches for the sake of accountability. So one of these things that I wanted to do is just kind of outline how the Canadian system is different from, for example, the American system, and how we've avoided kind of the crisis of gerrymandering that really plagues American boundary distribution. You've probably seen all of the different infographics and stuff about how American riding boundaries are in these weird shapes and so on, because they've been specifically made that way to concentrate votes for certain parties. And whichever party is in charge gets to redraw them in a way that suits their advantage the most. And we have largely found a way around that in this country. Partially how we do that is with the electoral boundaries commissions. So before we get there, I'll just kind of give a little more background about this number that the Chief Electoral Officer decided this week. So every 10 years, they take census data and then extrapolate some growth figures out of that, and then come up with what they think the increase should be. And there's a kind of formula within the Constitution around that. That formula was last tweaked under the previous Conservative government, which is why we went up from 308 to 338 during that period of time. There was some contention around the formula that they were using, because at the time they were trying to basically give Western provinces a lot more seats and say that Ontario didn't really need any more as the most populous province, and basically was trying to screw Ontario out of more representation. There was a big outcry from that. They did back down. Ontario got 10 more seats, but they probably should have had closer to 30 based on what they were kind of proposing around their formula for redistribution. But that's kind of where things are now. Based on this same formula, the Chief Electoral Officer has decided that in the following cycle, he's allocating 3 for Alberta, 1 for BC, and 1 more for Ontario. And in that, it also would remove 1 from Quebec, which would be the first time a province has lost a seat since 1966. This is going to be hugely controversial. The Bloc are already railing that this is undemocratic and this is removing their ability to protect the French language, and so on and so on. And there has been a move for a while that Quebec wants a guaranteed of 25% of the seats in the country. They haven't gotten that. There are kind of considerations to try and keep them at a fairly high enough level, but population growth being population growth, Quebec is not necessarily keeping pace with some of the other provinces. So that's some of the stuff that we're going to be thinking about before these boundary commissions get underway. So what happens now? So the Chief Electoral Officer has made his report. Now it goes to the Speaker of the House of Commons. There will be a new one named or voted on when Parliament resumes late November. It could be Anthony Rota again, but it could not be. He is definitely being challenged. So we'll see where that goes, who it's going to be. But in the meantime, there will be 10 electoral boundary commissions struck, so one for each province. The territories don't need them because it's just one MP per territory, just because they are so vast and so underpopulated that they really should have one MP for all three territories, but that's just unwieldy and denies them representation, so that's why it's kind of an exception for them. So what happens with each of these boundary commissions is the Chief Justice in each province appoints a judge to head one for each province. So they're all headed by a judge, and then the Speaker will name two more individuals per province. So you've got a boundary commission of 3. And from there, they start holding public hearings, and they will get input from the public and from the sitting MPs and from defeated candidates, and try and come up with a riding map that keeps certain communities together and tries to basically make sense while still keeping the population levels within each boundary relatively consistent within that province. Obviously, we have differences in the representation levels between provinces because of population levels and constitutional guarantees for minimum representation and so on, which is why PEI has 4 MPs and a very small number of electors per riding boundary, whereas Ontario is the complete opposite problem, where you have hundreds of thousands of people in an electoral district and so on. So from there, that's where the kind of hashing out of these maps takes place, and it's a process that's been removed from the politicians of the day. So that's why we've got these commissions to do the heavy lifting, and they will make recommendations which eventually get adopted. But there have been instances in the past where the MPs have tried to basically do the gerrymandering that they would try to get away with. And some of them have been cited by the commissions for attempting to do so in the past. And there have also been big controversies in some provinces like Saskatchewan and Alberta, most especially Saskatchewan, when it comes to dividing ridings between urban and rural areas. Saskatchewan had a thing for the longest time known as rurban ridings, where it was a small slice of urban with a lot of rural on the outside. So they look kind of like pie slices coming out of each city. And that is somewhat problematic because urban and rural ridings have different kinds of voting patterns. And when you've got a small urban area and a large rural area, the rural vote tends to outweigh the urban one and really disadvantages urban voters. And this was a problem, especially in Saskatchewan. It was also in Alberta for a long time. But with the growth in cities in both of those provinces, it made more sense for them to actually institute urban ridings for the first time. In Saskatchewan in the previous one. In Alberta, they had a few urban ridings, but a lot more urban ones, and that is now becoming a lot more urban ones and less rural influence on those votes. So that's kind of one of those things that was hugely controversial, but we'll see if they decide to revisit any of that. Unlikely, but it's one of those considerations that could be another battleground. So those are ways in which this system works in Canada, and we kind of avoid some of the same base partisan really tampering with the electoral map that happens in the states for partisan advantage. And it's a system that's been working fairly well and that doesn't really too badly tilt things in favor of one party or another. So that's kind of how it's working. That's kind of the system that's going to get underway. That process will get underway in the next few months. And that's kind of how that works. So I figured, this is what's going on and why it's important. And that's everything for this week. Join us again next week for some more Canadian politics. I'm Dale Smith. That's at journo_Dale on Twitter. And don't forget to like the video, share, subscribe, and support us on Patreon. Thanks, everyone.